It all started with a petty argument over my lawn. My house sat in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where everyone waved politely, kept their grass neatly trimmed, and gossiped just enough to stay entertained. The homeowners association was supposed to keep the place beautiful and orderly, but in reality, it was ruled with an iron fist by Karen, the kind of woman who could turn a slightly overgrown hedge into a federal case. She had this sharp, nasally voice that carried across the street and a permanent scowl etched into her forehead, as if smiling might crack her face. For years, I managed to avoid becoming her target. I kept my yard clean, paid my dues on time, and followed the rules. But one summer, I made the mistake of going out of town for 2 weeks to visit family. When I came back, the grass had grown a little taller than usual, and a few weeds poked through the flower beds. Before I even unpacked my suitcase, I found a bright orange violation notice taped to my front door. Karen had written it herself in dramatic block letters, demanding I fix the unsightly mess within 48 hours or face fines. I laughed it off at first. 2 weeks of growth wasn't exactly a jungle, but I took care of it anyway. Still, I could tell something had shifted. Karen had noticed me, and once she did, she didn't stop. It became a pattern. I'd get home from work to find little warning slips about, trash cans visible from the street, even though they were hidden behind my fence. She cited me for decorative lighting violations, because my string of warm white bulbs was too bright. She even knocked on my door one Saturday morning to inform me that my mailbox looked tired, and suggested I replace it before she had to take further action. By that point, I realized she wasn't just enforcing rules, she was harassing me. I started documenting everything. I took pictures of my property from every angle, saved every note, and recorded every interaction. My friends joked that I was building a legal case, and honestly, I half joked back that maybe one day I'd need it. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a cool autumn evening, and I'd gone to bed early after a long day. Around midnight, I woke up to the faint smell of smoke. At first, I thought a neighbor was having a late-night bonfire, but within seconds, I heard the smoke alarm. When I stepped into the hallway, I saw the faint glow of flames flickering from the living room window. Panic set in. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, and rushed out the back door in nothing but my pajama bottoms and a hoodie. By the time the fire trucks arrived, half the house was engulfed. The firefighters worked frantically, but it was too late, most of my home was destroyed. I sat on the curb, shivering, watching everything I owned turn to ash. The cause of the fire was unclear that night, but the next morning, the fire marshal told me something that made my stomach drop. The fire had started on my front porch, in a pile of gasoline-soaked rags that someone had stuffed under the wood railing. This wasn't an accident. Someone had set my house on fire. I didn't want to believe it, but my mind went straight to Karen. She'd been obsessed with my property for months, and the fire's location was no coincidence. It started in the most visible spot from her house. I gave the investigators every bit of documentation I had about our disputes. They didn't promise anything, but I could see the gears turning. A week later, one of my neighbors, an older gentleman named Tom, came forward. He'd been up late watching TV the night of the fire and saw a figure on my porch around 11:45 p.m., short, wearing a hoodie, and walking quickly back toward Karen's house. He didn't see her face, but he was sure of the direction. That was enough for the police to bring her in for questioning. Of course, she denied everything, claiming she'd been asleep. But when they checked her phone records, they found she'd made a call at exactly 11:50 p.m., just 5 minutes after Tom saw the figure, using a cell tower that matched the location of my block. The DA decided to press charges: arson, destruction of property, and reckless endangerment. When I got the news, I felt a mix of relief and disbelief. It wasn't over, though, not by a long shot. Because here's the thing. Karen wasn't just any HOA president. She was smug, manipulative, and convinced she could talk her way out of anything. She even tried to corner me at the mailbox one morning before the trial, leaning in close with that fake sweet smile and saying, "It would be a shame if the truth got twisted in court. Maybe we can work something out." What she didn't know was that I had installed a small body camera under my jacket after the fire. I recorded the whole exchange. Her tone, her words, it was all there. It wasn't a direct confession, but it reeked of intimidation. My lawyer was thrilled. The day of the trial, she strutted into the courtroom like she owned the place. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a model citizen and me as a difficult neighbor with a grudge. But when the prosecution played the security footage from a gas station a mile from my house, showing Karen buying a red gas can and a pack of rags just 2 hours before the fire, her smug expression faltered. And then came my recording. The jury leaned forward, listening to her syrupy threat, and I could see their faces harden. That was the turning point. In that moment, Karen realized she'd walked right into the trap. Her arrogance had given me exactly what I needed. And as much as I wanted to feel pure triumph, what I mostly felt was exhaustion. She'd burned down my home, but she couldn't touch the fact that she was now cornered by her own words. When the verdict came back, guilty on all counts, she stared straight ahead, not at me, as if I no longer existed. But I existed just fine. My house was gone, my possessions lost, but I still had my voice, my proof, and my victory. What Karen didn't understand from the start was that you can push a quiet neighbor only so far before they push back, hard. And in her case, that pushback came with flashing red lights, a courtroom audience, and a sentence that would keep her far from my neighborhood for a very long time. Alright, here's a 1,000-word expansion of part 2 for your scenario, keeping it immersive and without any headings. By the time the flames died down, my home was nothing but blackened beams and a warped chimney jutting into the night sky like a gravestone. The fire marshal's flashlight beam danced over the rubble, his boots crunching on charred wood. He didn't say much, just a grim nod that told me he already suspected this wasn't an accident. And deep down, so did I. Karen. She was the HOA president, the self-appointed queen of our cul-de-sac, and for the past year she'd made my life a slow drip of misery. Fines for faded mailbox paint, warnings about unsightly garden gnomes, even threats over the color of my front door. But in the weeks before the fire, it had escalated. She'd been livid over my refusal to remove the small solar panels I'd installed, claiming they violated community aesthetics. I'd found her lurking at the edge of my property more than once, glaring, muttering under her breath. Still, I'd never imagined she'd cross this line. The insurance investigators came. The fire marshal's report confirmed what I suspected: accelerants had been used. Someone had poured fuel along my porch and lit it like a torch. No lightning, no faulty wiring. Arson. When the police came to question me, I told them about the weeks of threats. About how Karen had once said, "If you won't make your house fit the neighborhood, maybe the neighborhood will make it disappear." The officer's eyebrow twitched. They asked if she had an alibi. I didn't know, but I had something better. 3 weeks before the fire, I'd installed a new security system. The cameras had melted in the blaze, but the footage was stored off-site in the cloud. The night of the fire, at 1:13 a.m., the feed caught a shadowy figure in a hoodie and jeans walking up my driveway. She carried something in each hand, gas cans. Even though her face was half hidden, I knew that walk. That tight, rigid stride like she was marching into battle. And just as she passed under the porch light, the hood slipped back for a second. It was Karen. The detectives didn't move as fast as I wanted. Weeks dragged by. They were building a case, gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses. Karen, meanwhile, strutted around the neighborhood like a victorious cat. She even had the nerve to smile at me one afternoon as I stood on the sidewalk staring at my burned foundation. That's when I decided, if the law was slow, I'd set my own trap. My lawyer and I filed a civil suit. Arson is a criminal matter, yes, but it's also a financial one. She had destroyed my property, and I was going to drag her into court where the burden of proof was lower. I knew she'd fight it. She was arrogant enough to think she could win. That arrogance was exactly what I needed. At the pre-trial hearing, she showed up in a bright red blazer like she was walking into a board meeting, not a courtroom. She tried to charm the judge, tried to dismiss the whole thing as a misunderstanding and personal vendetta. But she made one fatal mistake. She agreed to represent herself. She said lawyers were overpaid middlemen, and that she knew how to handle these situations. She didn't know how to handle me. I'd been quiet since the fire. I hadn't confronted her in person, hadn't made any social media posts, hadn't given her any clue about what I had in store. When discovery came, my lawyer and I produced the footage, the grainy but unmistakable clip of her walking up my driveway with gas cans. But we didn't just send the video. We sent the full, unedited night's footage. Hours of her pacing up and down the street earlier that evening. The defense thought they could claim the clip was taken out of context. Turns out, the context made her look worse. The trial was set for a Thursday morning. Karen walked in smirking, wearing pearls, holding a stack of papers she probably printed at the library. I sat there calm, my lawyer beside me, the USB drive with the footage in his briefcase. When it was my turn to testify, I kept my voice steady. I told the story from the start, the disputes over the HOA rules, the threats, the fire marshal's report. Then my lawyer turned to the judge and said, "Your Honor, we'd like to play Exhibit C." The courtroom's monitor flickered to life. There she was, Karen, walking into frame. Gas can in each hand. Hood slipping back. Her face catching the porch light. The muffled sound of sloshing liquid. Then the quick spark of a lighter. A bloom of fire. She froze, watching it spread, and then ran. You could hear her sharp intake of breath behind me. She tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand. "Ms. Roberts," he said, "I advise you to remain silent until your turn." Her turn was worse for her than I imagined. She tried to claim the video was fake. Said I, doctored it to frame her. My lawyer had anticipated this. We'd brought the security company's tech director to testify about the cloud storage, the timestamps, the lack of tampering. Every word from him was another nail in her coffin. The jury watched her unravel. First came the denial. Then the anger. She accused me of bringing down the neighborhood's value, and said I deserved to lose that house. That last part made the jury visibly bristle. When the verdict came, it wasn't just in my favor, it was brutal. The damages awarded were enough to rebuild my house twice over, with enough left to replace everything I'd lost. The judge also referred the case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. Karen didn't walk out that day. The sheriff's deputy was waiting in the hallway with a warrant. The look on her face when the cuffs clicked shut, that was the moment I'd been waiting for. Word spread fast. By evening, the HOA's board had called an emergency meeting to remove her as president. Neighbors who'd once avoided me now stopped by to shake my hand. One even brought over a casserole, which was almost enough to restore my faith in suburban humanity. It's been months now. My new house is halfway built, stronger than before. The neighborhood feels quieter without her constant shadow. I still see the faint outline of my old home in my mind sometimes, the way it looked in the moonlight before the flames, but I also see the courtroom, the monitor flickering, and the moment her smirk melted into panic. That's the picture I keep. The one where the fire she thought would destroy me lit up her own downfall instead. Do you want me to also expand part 1 so it matches the same style and pacing?